Welcome, everyone, to the first ever Michigan Department of Corrections Women's History Month Table Talk. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panel of distinguished MDOC employees. We are really looking forward to today's conversation. Before we get started, I wanted to say a deep and heartfelt thank you to Toya Williams, the department's Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. Today's roundtable was her idea and creation, so we would not be here right now without Toya's efforts. So thank you very much, Toya. For those who are watching who may be deaf or hard of hearing, there are live captions of today's event possible by clicking the three dots at the bottom of this screen, and from there you can click on live captioning. We also want to hear from you. So as we go throughout the conversation today, please submit your questions in the chat bar, and we will get to as many questions as possible before our hour here is up. Now, I'd like to briefly introduce our panel and then pass the mic over to Director Heidi Washington for some opening remarks. Today, our distinguished panel includes Beverly Smith, Assistant Deputy Director, Metro Region, FOA, Lachelle Fuller, the department's Recruitment Manager, Heather Gay, the department's Education Manager, and Cindy Dodds-Dugan, Assistant Deputy Director, Kinross Region, CFA. We will hear from them in just a minute about their path in this department, but first I want to introduce our director. Michigan has had the great fortune of having two female corrections directors. There are some states that still have not had one, and here we are, we've had two, and maybe the only state to have two, and unless someone says otherwise, we'll claim it. So for now, let me introduce Director Heidi Washington.
Oh, she's muted.
Hopefully we're not having technical difficulties. Director, are you there?
Yep, I'm sorry, technical difficulties. I was saying it is good to be here today, and thank you to everybody who helped put this event together. It's Women's History Month, as we all know, and Michigan is blessed to have some outstanding and tremendous female leaders in our department. In fact, I was doing a little bit of research on this, and as of right now, we have over 4,000 women working in the Michigan Department of Corrections. You know, it was back in 1983 that Pam Withrow became the first female warden of a male correctional facility. And today, when I look back over that time, you know, the trail that Pam blazed for all of us, women now and throughout the past many years have held many different roles within the department. We've had various women deputy directors, assistant deputy directors, all throughout the ranks of both field operations and correctional facilities administration. So I'm very proud to be a part of that. I'm proud of all of the women on this panel. When I talk to classes that are coming into the department, our new recruit schools, you know, I always tell them about the opportunity that exists within the Department of Corrections, that there's opportunity for everybody here. And I think that when you look at the diversity of this panel, that certainly proves that statement to be true, because each of the fabulous women on this panel have really taken advantage of all of the opportunities in the department. We have people who started out as correction officers, probation and parole agents, in the business office, and as a school teacher, who have taken each challenge as it has come their way and have paved the road for those coming behind them. And so I just want to thank all of the women on this panel for sharing their stories. I love hearing everybody's stories. Everybody's story is so unique. And every time I talk to staff around this department and hear about where they started and how they got to where they are today, I think it's really inspiring. So I'm looking forward to this hour to be inspired by all of these panelists who I consider friends and colleagues. And thank you for letting me open up this roundtable today. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Director. And we want to get now to our panel. And I just want to mention, I didn't mention this earlier, that this is a Teams live event. So for those of you for the last year who have been used to Teams meetings where you see everyone on the screen all at once. This is a little bit different where the person talking is going to be on the screen, and there's not an option for the different seeing all the people on the screen at once. So if you're watching this and you're wondering if something's wrong, it's not. This is just the new way that the Teams live events happen. So now, before we get to our questions, let's start by quickly having everyone tell us a little bit on this panel of how you started with the department and how your career evolved into your current role. And we're going to go to Bev for this first one. So Bev, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Well, my introduction with Michigan Department of Corrections was in 1985 when I took a night class with Wayne State University. Yvette Seiden-Kroom, who used to be a supervisor for Department of Corrections, was the adjunct professor there. And when I was taking that class with Yvette, I really didn't think about corrections, but she had Darlene Schimmel come and be a guest speaker. And Darlene was she was small of stature, she was soft-spoken, very nice. And I looked at Darlene and said, that's something I can do. If she can do it, I can do it. So because of that, I applied for the position and originally I applied for a position with CFA. Took the test, had an interview, took the fitness test, passed all of that, and I was waiting for my references when FOA came through, and I interviewed with them, and FOA was the first one to call me. So that's how I started my path with FOA, became a probation agent, and just moved up the ranks until I became the assistant deputy director about 5 years ago.
Great, thank you, Bev. Lachelle, let's go to you next.
Good morning. I started out as a corrections officer in 1993. Never thought I was going to be a corrections officer. I originally wanted to go into probation parole, and a recruiter that I worked with at the halfway house in Grand Rapids talked me into going into as a corrections officer to get my foot into the door. I started out at Adrian and transferred shortly thereafter and went and worked for Warden Withrow, who probably set my career path on its way. Less than a year, she had me doing counseling with her new STP program. And then from there, I promoted to recruitment manager. I worked in the EEO unit. I worked in internal affairs, and now I'm working in my dream job, which is the recruitment manager. So all along the path, I've had a lot of different jobs that kind of have molded into this career path.
Thank you, Lachelle. Let's go to Heather next.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Well, I started my career in 1999. I started out as a school teacher at Mid-Michigan Correctional Facility, now STF. And what's interesting about that is I went to college wanting to be a teacher, graduated with my teaching certificate, and there weren't a lot of teaching jobs in Michigan at that time. So my parents, both being state employees, said, well, look on the state website, let's see what's out there. And they said, you can do it, go work in prison. And I did, and I've loved it ever since. I also had the opportunity to work at Scott Correctional Facility with the women. I greatly loved that. That helped me grow as a leader too. Promoted to school principal at Macomb Correctional Facility, and then promoted and also covered Thumb Correctional Facility at that time, and then promoted to this position in 2012.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Let's go to Cindy to wrap it up.
Good morning. I started my career back in 1988, and it was actually retired Director Patricia Caruso. We both worked for Chippewa County, and Hiawatha Correctional at the time was being constructed, and that's when she inquired whether or not I would like to come to corrections. Of course, having a business degree, I thought, I don't know what I'm doing with a business degree going to corrections. But I tell you, when I started in 1988 and going forward, I have never regretted it, because just because my degree was in business doesn't mean that corrections did not have a niche found for me. I went from Hiawatha. We started out with shared services, went to Kinross, and then I later transferred to Chippewa Correctional. And through that, I provided oversight to support services, primarily for maintenance, warehousing, accounting, purchasing, and then of course budgeting. So through that, I spent a lot of time at the correctional facilities, and then of course we went regional. And then at this time, I was fortunate to be able to become the assistant deputy director, and still working with many great correctional facilities, except on a broader scan to include custody and housing.
Great, thank you, Cindy. So for our first question, we'll stay right with you. And so, Cindy, I'd like to ask, what were some challenges or obstacles that you faced throughout your career?
You know, challenges and obstacles at the time can be very disappointing, can be viewed as a personal attack to your work performance or your work area's performance. But as I look back at the challenges through my career, or obstacles, at the time they meant monumental, and really looking, they were actually building blocks. At the time, you didn't view it as that. You were like, oh, you know, why is this happening? But the ones in particular that I view is, again, in the business support services, is I had not even been with the department almost a year and a half. And that's when our department deemed that we should take a couple of facilities, go to a shared service concept. Well, of course, you know, when each facility had their own business officer, like, that is not necessary. We're being efficient. There's no need to do that. Well, we did that. And that was my first step. Then in 2005 is when our department deemed, and necessarily so, was for us to do shared services. And my experiences included similar to what occurred in Muskegon, to what occurred in St. Louis. And what that was to find efficiencies, find standardization, refine our processes. And as a leader doing that is that you're working, not only are you as a supervisor working through that process, but you're also dealing with individuals that you are encroaching on what we've always done, or this is the best way. And not every facility ran at the same workflow process. Some were more maybe technologically challenged, whereas some invited technology. And then the other issue is geographics. For the Kinross region, we're basically 10 hours span. We expanded, you know, we would go over to Ojibwe, Baraga, and then we would extend down to Muskegon. So what that resulted in is that we really had to be efficient on how we could do it. And then that next challenge went into the regionalization. And with that, that meant that we had to even expand more. And we had to work more with the Jackson regional office and the Ionia. So it wasn't just the components within the region, but rather it was a statewide endeavor. And looking back, that what we were doing, even though we're state appropriated fundings, we were doing what financial institutions were doing, what organizations were doing. So in looking back, it was necessary, and it's allowed us to be where we're at today. And even through a pandemic, we've been able to do it much, much better, given that we had, I guess, the insight to know that this was the right thing to do. So while I viewed it, you know, again, as challenges and obstacles, I now look at it that it was a necessary thing to do, and it has made us a much stronger state government agency. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sandy. I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in. If not, we can head to our next question. Bev, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to say that when I first became a supervisor, I had only had 7 years in with the Department of Corrections at the time. And at that time, it was unheard of to even apply for a supervisor position. People thought you needed to have 14 years, 20 years before you could become a supervisor. You had to do an in-basket test then, and if you scored it in band A, then you would get an interview. So I did. I took the test. I scored in band A. I got the interview and got the job. The difficulty came because the person that I had replaced was a supervisor who had been there about 18 years, was a male, and it was extremely difficult for the staff that I took over to embrace me. I had a very youthful appearance at that time, and people really didn't want to take me seriously, but it helped because what I knew I had to do was show them the policies. This is why I'm requiring you to do what I'm asking you to do. And not, they took the word of the supervisor that was there before them, because he was a male who had just been there for years, and whatever he said was correct as far as they were concerned, even though it was a lot of things he was telling them to do that was against policy. So I'd had to pull out the policy and say, no, this is how we're going to do it. This is why we're doing it. And eventually I did win over that staff.
Very good. Thank you, Bev. We'll go over to our next question now. We'll start with Heather first. Heather, what were some of your accomplishments throughout your career that you were really proud of?
Thank you, Chris. The biggest accomplishment I'd like to talk about first is the assembly of my education team. I think that my education team is really what brings the innovative ideas to education, the creativity. So I'd like to start there. Things such as the vocational village, a creative team. That's what helped. It wasn't one person. It wasn't just me. It was a group of people, all the way from Director Washington, all the way to Warden Brayman, all of these great leaders in the department that came together with one little concept and grew it into a vocational village. The only model in the nation. Before COVID, we had 16 other states that paid for their staff to come and tour our vocational village. 2 weeks ago, I sat on a national webinar to talk about our vocational village. So that's something that I'm very, very proud of, and this department is proud of as well. A second thing I would like to talk about too, that education has taken the lead nationally on, is our post-secondary opportunities. It started back in 2013 with a grant. We were one of 3 states picked to receive $1 million to provide face-to-face post-secondary education in prison. That data led to hopefully the Second Chance Pell Initiative. Again, Michigan on the forefront of that. We were the single largest recipient through one college of a Pell Awards. I'm pretty proud of that as well. The other thing I'd say personally that I'm proud of, I was elected and serve as the president of the other state education directors. I'm the president of the national president, so I'm pretty proud of that.
Great. Lachelle, did you have something to add?
I would say having 3 kids by the time I was 18, just having the guts to even take a full-time job. I started with corrections, driving 146 miles one way down to Adrian from Grand Rapids. So just even having the guts to get my foot into the door to make a better life for my children. And again, I worked in recruitment section as an analyst, and my dream job was to become the recruitment manager. And so now that I'm in that role, we've made a lot of accomplishments by continuing the process of hiring corrections officers, even during the pandemic. And so I didn't do it alone. My team helped, do it, and we adapted and have, I would say, overcome a lot of different obstacles and that have been put in our way, and still have managed to hire corrections officers for the state. So those are what I believe are my accomplishments.
Great. Thank you, Lachelle. We can head over to our next question. And for this one, I'd like to hear from Bev first. Working in a historically male-dominated field, was that a challenge for you? And if so, how were you able to adapt?
That was a challenge. I think the way that I adapted, though, was just to be my authentic self. I knew I had to work hard. I knew I wasn't going to be one that was invited to the golf course. Although I just took up golf about 3 years ago and totally love it. But at the time that I was first a supervisor and then program manager, it was just my work ethic, recognizing that what I said was true, that what my word was true, and that I was going to do the work and put in the effort. And with that, I think people started to recognize the abilities that I had to do different jobs, and gave me the opportunity to do that.
Great. Is there anybody else who'd like to add in to that one on the panel? And I guess Bev just did such a good job knocking it out of the park on that one. So All right. Well, I want to just take a quick reminder for our audience that you can. This would be a great time to put in your questions now, and if when we have time at the end, we'll definitely get to those. So, for this next question, I'd like to go to Cindy. Do you have any advice for women who are seeking to start a career in the Department of Corrections?
Yes, actually, I do have some advice that I believe that would apply to any female that wanted to, or women that want to join our department, is that a career in corrections is actually contingent on what the individual wants to define as their career. There are many job opportunities within our department for individuals that maybe want to work out in the field, such as FOA, if they want to work in a central office setting, if they want to work in a correctional setting. We have healthcare, education, and I believe what the women need to do is that when they come to our department is for them to be always remain professional, for them to team with mentors or to find coworkers that are wanting to have the best skill sets. Look for mentors, ask questions. And geographically, you think about our department, as I mentioned in my previous comment, was we have a department that allows for women to choose careers from into the Upper Peninsula to the Lower Peninsula, from Detroit across to Adrian, across to Jackson. And my experiences have been is that if they're willing to be open-minded, to look at career paths, to see what is their best fit, our department is an excellent employer that will look out for us, that they will promote us, that they will recognize, just as today they'll recognize us for our accomplishments. If there are challenges, if there's disappointments, our department is there to support us. Mm-hmm. And don't just, and we have areas where there's prisoner contact, such as at a correctional setting, whereas you may go to regional offices or go to central office where maybe the contact with prisoners are limited. But in any of those cases, it's going to be up to the women that come to our department as to what they want for their career. And a career doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a supervisor. You can have a career in any position in our department, and as long as you do well, that's what the department expects of you, and that's how we appreciate. So I would just encourage any women that are looking to come to our department or that is currently within our department, seek out, ask questions, and look to see potentially where you could be at a later time.
Thank you, Cindy. I'd like to go to Heather next, but I just also want to let the panel know that this is such an important question, I think, that I'd like to hear from each of you on this. So after Heather, we'll go to Bev, and then we'll go to Lachelle. So Heather, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I would really echo what Cindy said. The opportunities in our department are endless. Hard work, dedication is gonna get you wherever you want to go. I encourage women, I encourage all staff to make a plan, write a plan, make a plan, set goals for yourself, and then work towards those goals. I've always been blessed to have a lot of role models in this department. Since I've worked in the facility to now working in central office, I have a lot of role models and mentors, and I think that's important. As women in corrections, we should all try to take young women under our wing when they walk through those gates. So that's what I would say, Chris.
Thank you, Heather. Bev, what would you like to add?
I agree with the panelists. I would say don't be afraid of a challenge. Like I said at first, when I saw Darlene, that made me think I can do this. So it's important for women who work in the Department of Corrections to be visible so that other women coming in can see them. It's important for us to walk around, talk to people, encourage staff to know that they can do it. Whatever they put their mind to, they can do it.
Great. We'll go to Lachelle.
I would say the same as all the panelists have said. There's so many opportunities within the Department of Corrections that a lot of people are unaware of, but once you get your foot into the door and you're working in different positions, take advantage of, various trainings or mentorship. There's, again, like they all said, there's been a lot of women in corrections that have said, oh, I want to be like that person, or how did they get to that position? So I would say take advantage of any opportunities. There's going to be some no's along the way. There might be a couple of jobs that you don't get, but what's meant for you will come to you when it's time. I remember thinking way back when I worked as an analyst in the recruitment section that I wanted to be the manager at that point. Well, I'm so glad I did not get the job at that point. I was not ready for management, and all of my positions along the way have helped prepare me for the management position now. So take advantage of opportunities, training opportunities, or anything that you can get involved in to meet people, network, and excel yourself.
All right. Thank you, Lachelle. I think we'll go, we'll stay there with you, Lachelle, and we'll ask a question on, as the department's recruitment manager, what are some of the challenges faced when recruiting females into the department, and what are we doing to encourage more women to join the MDOs?
I think the biggest challenge is women think of this as a dangerous job. They're apprehensive about working in a prison in and of itself, and we do a lot of encouraging women when we go to career fairs. So one of the things that we do, we try to send a team where there's a male and a female, so that when females come up to the recruitment booth, they have the opportunity to get the male perspective or the female perspective. It's a lot of sales. You have to really sell corrections, because in and of itself, most people, even like when I started as a corrections officer, all of my friends try to talk me out of it. But I had 3 little kids, and I needed a job. I needed the benefits. I had already worked at the halfway house, and I had already determined that, this was going to be the career path that I wanted to take. So you just have to encourage them. You tell them about the different things that are in corrections. You kind of compare it to what they currently do. So you'll ask them, okay, where do you currently work? I work at McDonald's. Okay, well, have you ever been, cussed out or had an angry customer come at you? And they'll say typically yes. And how do you deal with that situation? So we kind of connect them with their communication skills on how to deal with prisoners. And while there may be more instances in prison than there might be at McDonald's, I'm not really sure, but try to compare to what they've already dealt with in their life that they probably haven't even thought about. And so we connect them with the women, and then we also have women that work in the recruitment section that if somebody's kind of on the fence, they've applied for the position, but they're not really sure, we have women reach out to them and just say, okay, what are your apprehensions? What are your concerns? And then we also have women at the local facilities that might connect with them on a more personal level, as far as, I'm from this, facility. This might be the facility that you're going to work at. Let me tell you a little bit about the facility. So we try to do advertisements showing females in corrections, and really it's just a lot of talking to and connecting with women to encourage them, to take the position, and at least to try it. Get your foot into the door, go to the academy and see what it's like. Then go to your on-the-job training and then see what it's like. And once they do it, then I think their apprehension goes down once they get some of that training.
Great. I don't know if there's anybody else that wanted to add to that. If not, we've already gotten some really good questions in the queue. So we've got one from Debbie Warren, and I'm gonna have Bev start with this one because I think she might have a good answer for this one. I'm just gonna guess, and then others can feel free to jump in. But Debbie asks, what are some good ideas or examples you can give for applying the idea of servant leadership as a female supervisor in the department?
I love the idea of servant leadership because it's not about you. It is about your staff. What can you do for your staff? What can you give them so that they can do the job that they need to do? I've taken that on from, I would say, day one, when I had different leadership classes, and we talked about, your circle of influence. That became something that I really enjoyed because I recognized that I might not have influence over the things that are outside of my little bubble, but I do have influence over my staff at that time. And because I did that and would say, okay, this is what we need to do, your strongest, you would have a chain, and the weakest link is the person that you have to continue to bring up, show them a standard, and make sure that they continue to lead by that standard that you have. Don't go down to the standard that they have, but you bring them up to where you want them to be. And in doing that, when people recognize that you cared about them, they cared about doing a better job for you. So my circle of influence just continued to increase until I became the assistant deputy director. But that's all because I think people recognize that I really do care about them and I want them to do the best and have the best.
See, we didn't even practice that. That's why Bev is the best. So thank you. Thank you for that. Does anybody else want to jump in on that one? Heather, what did you have to say?
I would just add, Chris, that I think it's important as a leader that we use the word we as opposed to the word I. I think that when you throw an idea out and you've assembled such a great team that you can cultivate ideas, you can evolve ideas that turn into pushing the needle in this department, I think that speaks a lot. So I think servant leadership is also very, very important as a leader, to incorporate leading as a role model and also we as opposed to I.
Great. Cindy, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yes, and to just complete to what Bev and Heather has said, is as a supervisor, as a leader, many times when we are tackled with a process or a dilemma, we don't necessarily personally know the answer. And to go along with the we and to lead that's when we rely on our staff and we build them up and we challenge them and our attitude towards it. Sometimes it may be a very difficult task that we're being charged with, but how our attitude towards it, we can do it. And many times I'll tell them I'll say, this is what we're going to go with. And if we have to tweak it along the way, or if we have to divert a little bit to go back to pick up some of maybe the aspects we didn't think of, that is okay, because our goal as a team is that we're going to come up with the best product, and it's inclusive, it's going to be teamwork, and all of us are going to be proud of what we've accomplished.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for answers to that. We've got another question here in the queue. Has there ever been a time in your career when you felt that you were in this alone? And if so, what did you do? And I guess I'll take, does anybody want to take a stab at that first? Cindy, go ahead.
I sure will. Actually, it has to do with what we've done in the last year. When I started the acting position as assistant deputy director, my predecessor said, Cindy, not a problem. You've got this, just some hard work and your attitude you're going to accomplish. Well, little did we know we were also going to go into a pandemic. And then we were going to be obviously working, some of us were required to work from home. So there was maybe some instances where I thought I was not keeping up with the workflow, or I didn't know something, or with the pandemic, how should I deal with it? But we have this department, I think if anything, this pandemic has brought our department closer together, and there was never us alone. We maybe as a department sometimes felt that we were dealing with aspects of this pandemic that maybe the outside world did not understand, but you're never alone, because there are so many support groups. There are other people that are feeling the same way. What you have to do is you just have to reach out, and it's okay to say, I don't understand this, or I know it's a policy, which policy it is. And that is not a sign of being alone. It's more so being strong to say, what direction should I go? Have we already addressed it? And actually, it makes you a stronger individual, whether you're working in, in a position, at the facility or out in the field or as a supervisor. One should never feel alone because there's always been somebody else that is currently dealing with it or will deal with it in the future.
Great, thank you, Cindy. I think Bev had something she'd like to add to this one.
Yes, let me first say this is not the department it was when I first started in 1987. So when I tell this story, people will know, okay, this will never happen to you now. But in 2000, I believe it was, when I was promoted to program manager, second day on the job, I got a call from the then RA who told me, this person needs to be discharged. You need to call them into your office. Get all of their belongings that belong to the Department of Corrections, have them walked out. This is the second day on the job, and call me back when it's done. So I felt quite alone in that situation. I didn't know what to do, but I got through that, and I realized that the people that I was working at Chrysler at the time, and I thought the people at Chrysler are never going to accept me. 2 days on the job and you're walking somebody out. But because of that, I said, well, let me just get together a group of people. So I got clericals, an agent, a supervisor, and then myself as the program manager, and we formed a team. And I thought, because people may be afraid to talk to me, they will not be afraid to talk to their coworkers. So any issues that you have, anything that you see that's going on at Chrysler that you like or don't like, bring it to the table and we can talk about it. And I still call Chrysler my family to this day, because I think they taught me a lot about leadership, and they recognize that, okay, she's not a bad person, this is just a job that she had to do at the time, but that allowed me to just kind of grow and recognize that you can't do it by yourself and you're not alone. So even if you may feel alone, like Cindy was saying, there's a group of people that you can get together and you can work through any situation.
Great. Did anybody else wanted to address that one? If not, we can head to our next question. This question comes from someone who doesn't have their name, but it says, there are several jobs that I've been eligible for to move into the supervision level. However, even meeting with the requirements and having an excellent work record, these positions have been filled with white males of her equal. What can she do, to get that interview? And how can she, remove some of these barriers to be able to get to that next step? Anybody have any thoughts on that? And Bev, let's hear from you on that one.
I'm constantly preaching and teaching about making sure we have a diverse leadership, have diverse group, and asking supervisors to mentor your staff. And mentor all of your staff, not just, white males, not just Black females, but mentor all of your staff that can come up. And we open it up so that we make sure that everyone has the opportunity to have those interviews.
Great, thank you. Heather, did you have something you'd like to add?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris. One thing that I would add is that diversity has to be at the forefront of what we're doing and what we're leading. I think it's really important to reach out. If you do apply for a job, reach out to those folks that you trust. Maybe even somebody that was on the interview panel and say, hey, is there something I can practice? Will you do a mock interview with me to give folks a chance to continue to interview and get more practice? But I think we have to be diversified for our population that we serve, and we have to be innovative in hiring practices.
Great, thank you, Heather. We have another question from Debbie, who's this is more of a technical question, but I think it's still good to get the information out there. Is there a recruitment manager for FOA? And is there a current collaboration with colleges and universities' criminal justice programs to attract potential candidates or to discuss with professors, what the department's in need of and encourage those relationships, or even a passable path to the MDOC, just like Bev said, it's kind of how she got started. So anybody have any thoughts on that? Maybe Lachelle, you can start with that one.
There's not a recruitment manager for FOA. I'm the only recruitment manager. However, we have recruiters from the FOA region, as well as CFA. And what was the second part of that question, Chris? I'm sorry.
Are we collaborating with colleges and universities to establish relationships?
Yes, absolutely. We collaborate with colleges and universities. Unfortunately, we're in a virtual world right now, so we do a lot of virtual career fairs. And what's different about that is when you go to a live career fair, people are walking past all the time, and you can kind of pull them in. Hey, have you ever thought about corrections? Whereas the virtual fairs, people aren't necessarily walking by. You have to wait for them to get online to chat with you. So we've been reaching out to various different colleges. We've invited colleges to talk to our new recruits at each academy and to tell them, what they have to offer. And then we also do, we've been trying to go to classrooms. So if there's a criminal justice class, corrections class, or, probation parole, we'll go into the classroom and speak to their college students. Most of the colleges prefer employers come through the job fairs, but if they will allow us to come to their actual classes, we've been doing that a little bit more as well.
And then we'll stick with Lachelle just for a second. I know that we just had a really great and innovative program. I think it was on Facebook where we Facebook Live, I believe it was, where you were trying to attract people to the MDOC just in the Upper Peninsula. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that went and what we hope to come from that?
Yes. So we did a Zoom event and we advertised on Facebook, and we had 29 participants show up in the small amount of time that we advertised. And so what we did is we had, so instead of having it was called an open house. And so we had all of the UP facilities that participated. And so we came all together. We talked a little bit about corrections, the position, corrections officers, and the other positions that are in corrections. Talked about paid benefits, and then we had these breakout rooms where there was Chippewa facility, Alger, Marquette, Baraga, and then we had a room for military and recruitment. And the participants were able, after the initial introduction, the participants were able to go from different rooms to ask the questions that they had. So if they were interested in information about the Chippewa facilities, they jumped over to Chippewa. If they were interested in Marquette, they jumped to Marquette. If they wanted to have information regarding military or the application process, then they would come into the HR room. What that did was, it was our kind of precursor to what we're going to do more often in our virtual world. So now we will have more Zoom events. They'll be probably regionalized. We'll have some specific to facilities like the Women's Huron Valley. So it's opened up a whole new world, and actually went well. We only had a couple technical glitches, but it actually went well, and the participants were happy with the information that they were seeking. And out of that, we had 11 people showed up out of the 29 that registered, and 4 additional people applied for a position from that event.
That's great. Did anybody else want to talk about recruitment or anything along those lines with that question? If not, Bev, let's hear from you on that one.
I was just going to say, for FOA, yes, we do talk with different colleges, and I was on the advisory board for Baker College, making sure that they knew when positions were available, and that their college students could apply for positions in FOA. So yes, we do that for FOA as well, the recruitment part.
That's great. So we have another question in the queue for Lachelle, and I'll just put one last shout out for everyone who's watching this event today. If you do have a question, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A right now before we get too close to the end of the hour. So we just have a few more minutes, so please go ahead and submit those questions now. But there's a question for Lachelle. How did you gain the experience and the knowledge to be eligible for the recruitment manager position?
Well, let's see. I worked in the recruitment section as an analyst from 95 to 2005. The recruitment section, I ended up getting bumped from there and went into the EEO division and did civil rights investigations, diversity training. And then I got bumped from there and went into internal affairs. While I was in internal affairs, I decided at the age of 5 to go back and get my master's degree. And a lot of people were like, "Are you crazy?" So, but one of the things that I always had a passion for in recruitment, even in 95 to 2005, is how do we get more people interested in this position? How do we turn it around where people don't think so negatively of corrections or being a corrections officer? You know, there's a lot that corrections has to give, but if you're not willing to get your foot into the door, then you're not going to know what they have to offer. And so it's always been a passion of mine to bring people up like I brought myself up. Having 3 kids at a young age, I was supposed to be on welfare my whole life. And so I wanted people to know about the opportunities that corrections has to offer. So I went back and got my master's degree, and I actually researched, my research paper was about how to get people, how to diversify the workforce in corrections and law enforcement. So it's just always been my passion. I went back to school and got my master's degree and graduated in 2017, and then never knowing that this opportunity was going to come up again. And so I just applied for the position and prayed on it.
Great. Okay, we have another question. Maybe Heather might be a good person to start with this one because it's education related. What are some of the issues you will face as a trades instructor with the students at the correctional facility, and how can you overcome them?
I think the biggest obstacle that I hear from our trades instructors that sometimes they face is they're really good at the training and really good at the hands-on, and sometimes wish we could provide a little more professional development around the teaching aspect. So when you have a student that enters your trades classroom, although they have a GED or potentially even a high school diploma, sometimes they need a little extra help in measuring. They need a little extra help in how to read a tape measure, those type of things. So what we've really done is encouraged at a lot of our facilities is a cohort teaching model. And part of that cohort teaching model is where our academic teachers are able to, in some situations, support our vocational instructors as well, whether it's through workshops, whether it's through using our teacher aides or Title I aides, just to provide that extra support for our trades instructors.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. I think we'll go to I think what probably will be our last question for this morning. For all the panelists, and I'd like to get everyone's thoughts, and I'll just pick somebody at random here to get us started. So for all the panelists, what do you want your legacy to be? So I guess I'll start with Cindy to start. Pick on you first, Cindy.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Chris. What I want my legacy to be is I want to be viewed as a leader that led by example, whether it was through actions, my direction, my physical presentation to make sure I always tried to present it in a professional manner. I hope that I will be viewed that I was empathetic for some of the challenges that we have to deal with in the workplace, that I provided empathy, I was fair, and more importantly, that if we have projects, that make sure that the ownership and the recognition went rightfully to the right individuals, and to always try to have a positive attitude that we're, again, going back, we're not alone in this, that we're a team, and to be proud of the Department of Corrections. And we work hard. Many times I think we're the hard work that our staff put in and the challenges we faced, it's just, I think, not understood, so it's not appreciated. So I hope my legacy will be that I fairly represented the department and I mentored so that the next generation of Department of Corrections employees will just continue to take this department and excel to be leaders nationally.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Let's go to Heather next and hear her thoughts.
Thank you, Chris. What I want our legacy to be is bigger than me. I want it to be that nationally When you hear Michigan, you automatically think of correctional education, whether you're talking about post-secondary, whether you're talking about vocational, whether you're talking about employment, whatever you're talking about, I want Michigan to be known as the leader in correctional ed. And I appreciate this administration, this leadership giving us a seat at the table. And I think that this is, we've had a few years going strong and it's only going to get better. So that's what we're going to keep working for in education.
Thank you, Heather. And let's go to Lachelle next.
That's a big question. I guess I want my legacy to be, I want to be known as a leader. I want to be a person that has made a difference in people's life, not only my team, but then the people that we hire as well. And I just want to be able to be, our recruitment section to be, nationally known, or our recruitment efforts to be nationally known on how we've accomplished recruiting and hiring corrections officers. So I think that's what I want my legacy to be.
Great, thank you, Lachelle. And before I get to go to Bev to answer this one, I just want to mention, in case you didn't see it, but in the Q&A, somebody asked a question, but I'll just want to start with the top of it, who says, Mrs. Smith has always been a gracious servant leader. As a probation officer, when she stops by the office, there is a spirit of grace and compassion that she extends to us. It feels great and very much needed. And she's asking how others, can buy into servant leadership. So if you want to answer that, but also your legacy question as well.
Well, actually, what was just said is what I want my legacy to be. I want people to recognize that I do care deeply about them and about their families, about their desires, whether it's to promote or whether it's to be the best agent they can be, the best supervisor they can be. I think to get people to buy into servant leadership means that they have to recognize it's not about them. I bought my daughter some pajamas years ago. She was 13, and they said, it's all about me. That's what the pajamas said. All written over the pajamas was, it's all about me. And I did that because she was into herself a lot at that age. But what we really need to recognize is, how can we be better for other people? To me, that's the truly servant leadership. How can I make it better for someone else? Because if I make it better for someone else, it will definitely be better for me.
Great. Thank you, Bev. And I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Washington if she has any closing thoughts for us today before we close out on this hour.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, all of the panelists. I was very impressed and very inspired, as I am by each of you every day. And I'm glad that the rest of our department has gotten this opportunity to spend some time with you. And I think to be inspired by you and to see each and all of you as a role model. And so this has been a great opportunity. And I think that we should have more opportunities like this. And that's one of the things that COVID has taught us with the use of technology, is there are a lot of ways that we can connect with one another. And I hope that we'll do more of this in the future. So thank you all for your service, for what you do each and every day. And I just wish you nothing but the best. And thanks, Chris, for hosting the panel. And we will talk to you all soon.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. We will have information in tonight's daily message for those for an ability to provide feedback, so look for that. So if you would like to see more events like this, please let us know. But again, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.